Well, I always have birds with me, okay? And so if I use my hands a lot, it's because I don't know what to do when I don't have a bird. We had a little miscommunication about whether it would be possible to bring one of my education birds into the zoo because of possible contamination. So I'm here by myself to talk about what it's like to be a backyard rehabilitator. Backyard rehabilitators means that you're not connected with a university or some organization. We're on our own in the state of Iowa. We have to follow certain rules, of course. I only work with birds. So that means I have to be licensed by the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service first. I can't work with them until I get that permit. The federal people control what I can do. My federal permit says that I can work with all birds in Iowa, including endangered species. That's my rehabilitation permit. My rehabilitation permit says that I have to have certain sized cages to fit each species, flight cages. So that means if I have a red-tailed hawk that I'm working with, I need to have at least a 40-foot cage. 40 feet by 10 by 12-foot cage. And then they kind of come down from there. I've never been equipped to hold bald eagles for any length of time. I can stabilize them, but then they have to move on because they require at least 100 feet, and I don't have that much room. I live on an acreage that's wooded. Was not prepared to cut down trees in order to build a 100-foot cage. So that gives you an idea of what we have to have. We have to be able to provide them with the kind of food that they would eat in the wild. We can't go to the grocery store and get chicken legs and chicken necks and feed to them. It has to be the kind of food that they would be finding in the wild. My life changed dramatically in 1980. In 1980, the last of our 4 children, the last 2 of our 4 children, went off to college. And so I cleaned up the peanut butter and changed the room around, and I got in my car and started birding seriously. And this all really started because I made a phone call to a woman called Gladys Black to ask her about a bird that was nesting in a pine forest in Clark County. That's where I'm from. And Gladys said, well, why don't you come over and go out in the field with me? Oh my goodness, Gladys Black, Iowa's famous bird lady, has asked me to come over and go birding with her? Oh, let me tell you, I exploded, and I got in that car and I never looked back. So, after 3 years of birding with Gladys and helping her do programs, picking her up, helping her take her education birds, helping her do slideshow presentations just really schlepping her around all over the state, she said to me, why don't you apply for your federal permit and your state permit? And once again, I thought, Gladys Black thinks I'm smart enough to do this? Because I knew no other rehabilitators in the state. I knew that the Department of Natural Resources, when they became the Department of Natural Resources and not the Conservation Commission, stopped taking care of wildlife. I knew that because I had met Gladys when a snowy owl dropped out of the sky in Clark County, and I took this snowy owl to Gladys to be rehabilitated. So I applied for my state and my federal permit, and I got it. So now I had a rehabilitation permit. I had to build the cages that were appropriate for the kind of birds that would be coming in. I had to find a source for food called mice, rats, quail, that sort of thing. And now, guess who's not doing rehabilitation? Gladys. So, I am now doing about 100 birds a year, and I'm not having as much time for birding with Gladys and going in the field and doing studies with her. And one day, when I was helping her with a program with her live birds, on the way back to her house, she said, Beth, why don't you apply for your education permit? And once again, I'm such a sap. I said, this is wonderful. She thinks I can do this. So I apply for my permit, and I get a permit for up to 6 education birds, and I fill that 6, and guess who's calling me? All the people who used to call Gladys for bird programs. Now that schools from Mahaska County, Marion County, Lucas County, Union County, some Poweshiek, actually, counties, Polk County, the county Newton is in, the county Marshalltown's in. Okay, now I'm really in the car with my education birds, and I'm not getting to do as much birding. Well, as if that weren't enough, she was banding one day for Warren County Conservation Board for Joel Van Ruckel, if you all know Joel. And on the way home, she said, Beth, why don't you apply for your banding permit? And once again, oh my goodness, she thinks I can do this on my own. So I apply, and it's not as easy as it all sounds. You have to write up papers to justify all of these permits. You have to make them believe that you have a project there that's going to change the world, okay? Well, I evidently did it with bluebirds because the banding laboratory believed me, and I got a banding permit. So now, all of my friends I read about on Iowa Birdline, they're out birding in the summer, and I'm out banding birds for the Red Rock Corps of Engineers and any other group that has a trail or a martin box. So that means that I'm in the car and I'm not birding. So that's kind of the way it all started. And from there, it's been, I got my first permit in 1983. Some of you aren't even this old, okay? So I've been doing this longer than you've been on this planet. My life changed, my husband's life changed. I had to find ways to support my project because I felt it wasn't fair that he needed to take care of the entire bill. And it runs anywhere from, depending on the year, runs anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 a year in doing rehabilitation with birds, particularly with raptors. So I somehow or another fooled somebody into thinking that I could cook. And she wanted to start a little luncheon place in Osceola, kind of like a coffee shop that your mothers or your grandmothers, not your mothers, but your grandmothers probably go to, those kinds of places. So my job was going to be to plan luncheons. And so many a day, 24 a day, lunches, special lunches. And it became such a success that she decided to turn herself into a restaurant. And I wasn't interested in working in a restaurant, so I gave that up. That was a way to earn money to buy those 300 mice, like what are coming next week to my house, along with 50 quail that are coming next week. So I had a friend who grew wildflower seeds, and she had a wildflower planting project in Des Moines at some of the most prestigious houses like Hubbell's, in planting wildflowers in their yard. And she knew that I was into gardening big time, so she called and asked me if I would help. So now I'm gardening. And at one of the houses, I'm there sweating, just filthy dirty, of course. It's terribly hot work. And the woman of the house came out, and I see her feet. I'm on my hands and knees on the ground, and I see her feet. And I look up, and Kay says, "Beth, why are you doing this?" And I said, "Because I want to." You understand, my husband was a judge, a district court judge, and had been a lawyer before that. And it didn't fit her image of what his wife should be doing. So there I am on the ground sweating in front of Kay Bucksbaum, who builds shopping malls, okay? Well, we got all that. I decided to stop doing that, and actually the jobs dried up because we hit every one of those homes because that got to be the thing to do, and so that dried up. Then my conservation board decided that maybe, since I had absolutely no experience at all, that I would be a really good naturalist and be the environmental education person for our school system. So now I am something I have no idea what to do, okay? This is all to support these hawks, owls, and all those songbirds that come in the summertime. It's like sending a kid to college, you know. You've got to always have something. So Warren County Conservation Board took me under their wing, and they instructed me what to do. And so This was my last year after I went on part-time. I've been with them for 27 years and finally got up to $9.50 an hour. And I had the privilege of providing the office too, and my car, my vehicle. So, gosh, that sure made a lot of money for us, didn't it? Not much. Well, in between that, I did a little bit of catering work for Meredith Publishing Company because I had a friend who was the head of catering there, and he asked me to come and help him when they were doing big breakfasts or luncheons for their board of directors, that kind of thing. So I am serving some people, their board of directors. And I see one of my best friends sitting there, and I set the plate down and say, "Hi, Bob." And he says, "Well, Beth," and he got up and he hugged me. And guess who was sitting across the table from him? Kay Buck's mom. And her mouth dropped open like, this is the end of the world. I mean, why is this woman doing this? Well, it's to be fair to that man who's put up with me for 57 years. It's the fair thing to do for me to try to support this. Rehabilitator, the point of all these stories is that rehabilitators get no funding from either the federal people or the state. In fact, we get to pay them for our permits. I just renewed my federal permit for rehabilitation until the year 2018. Boy, that's going to be a real trick, isn't it? And I got to send them a $75 check in order to get to do that. Now, I want to tell you, I was born in 1932, so you can do the math, how old I'm going to be in 2018. Well, I might, have my walker, but I suppose I'll be out there like I was this morning, because the other thing that happens to rehabilitators is you never plan to go any place without that phone ringing, somebody saying, "I've got a bird to bring you." And sure enough, this morning at 9:15, a person in Union County, the director of the Union County Conservation Board, calls and says, "I don't know what kind of a bird this is. It's a hawk, and I've got it in a box, and can I bring it to you?" And I said, "I'm on my way to Des Moines." And he said, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. So in 40 minutes, here comes this bird that turns out to be a rough-legged hawk. And I am trying to examine it, and the clock is ticking, and I needed to be in my vehicle by 10:15. So that's the way it goes. Every single time I plan to go anyplace, the phone rings. And heaven forbid I should take a vacation, because the phone will ring as I'm getting in the car with probably a half dozen birds deciding that they need to be taken care of. I sat out in the parking lot this morning and filed my fingernails. I suddenly looked down and thought, oh my word, these things look awful. Rehabilitators not only have fingernails that never get taken care of, but our clothes are always dirty. No matter whether it's that thing you would wear to a party or whether it's your grubs, you always have bird poop on you someplace. Always. If we can afford those clothes to go to that party, because we're too busy buying food for these animals. It's our choice. We have chosen to do this. Rehabilitators, when I started doing this, there was a national organization that I did not know about, but we weren't organized in the state. And so the non-game biologist, whose wife was a rehabilitator, gathered together a group of us to form an association. So Iowa Wildlife Rehab Association was born back in 1986. So now we know who we are. We know who, when somebody calls from Iowa City and says, do you know of anybody who takes care of bunnies over by Iowa City that could take this animal? Because mammal rehabilitators have to be licensed too. So the organization has been a wonderful thing, and the national organization has become so professional that when they have their meetings, people come from all over the world to attend these meetings, and they're held in different places all over the country. It's amazing how this, in that length of time, 30 years, this organization has grown. It also educates people. In Iowa, you can get a permit with only if you have spent a year under a master rehabilitator or 2 years under a licensed rehabilitator. You can be an apprentice for those years before you get your permit. In some states, you have to actually get a license, but that hasn't happened in Iowa yet, and it might take a while because you all know how things work in this state in protecting wild animals and exotic wild animals. We all know that. It's tough. So even though we've been working for this, in order to make rehabilitation be as professional as possible, a lot of conservation officers have finally accepted us. A lot of them did not, because they thought we were bunny lovers, tree huggers, that we were trying to make pets out of these animals. And yes, there are some people who have done that. And as an association, we have tried to fix this, to stop the baby deer, and I can't even think what you call them, sleeping alongside the bed in the bedroom, okay, that kind of thing, because we did have that. And listen, when I started, I made so many mistakes that I learned after I started reading and learning and talking to the professional people. I had a great horned owl, one of my very first animals that I imprinted so terribly. I released that bird. That bird would come down and untie the shoelaces of the UPS guy. We had chimney sweeps there one day, and this owl came in and lit on the roof, and his doing that thing that great horns do. Well, all owls, they do that kind of funny little walk when they're walking. And here are these two chimney sweeps up there on top of this house that's quite, it looks like a chicken house. It's really tall and peaked. And they're going, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown. And I go outside, and here's that great horned owl right up in their faces, just watching what they were doing. They were terrified. But the UPS guy thought it was great fun to have this. Do you know great horned owl has a foot bigger than my hand? They're huge. And to have that flying down could untie his shoelaces. I have no idea what that bird was thinking, of course. None. So that was one of my first lessons about what not to do. Okay. Never raised another great horn youngster like that again. In fact, we do everything we can to get them back into a nest. That's the best thing to do. Another time, I got a call, and I was on the road, actually, and this was a success. And I haven't, was there a flyer? Did you make a flyer? A flyer. I sent you the picture of the barn owl. My successes are when they happen, are just splendid. There's nothing like it. I want to tell you, there's just nothing, unless you've raised children and gotten them up there where they go off and they're successful, then that's the same kind of feeling. I got a call from Lucas County, and an owl, they thought, had dropped down in a creosote chute that where creosote is dumped into those trucks that go out and put creosote on the roads. They were road worker, things. This owl had evidently been perched up there, and when they opened the chute, it fell down into the bed of the truck, and it was so covered with tar and creosote they couldn't tell what it was. They just knew it was a raptor. And so the Conservation Board took it to their office and started trying to clean it up. And they called me, and I said, I'll meet you. It was a barn owl. Barn owls to me they're just the most wonderful creature on this whole planet. There's something so ethereal, so spiritual about a barn owl. They're a different species from all other owls. They're Tydos. All other owls belong to Strigidaes. They're this incredible animal. They're just wonderful. Well, once again, egos get to be a problem with us when you work with animals, and all of you must know this, that ego gets in there. And I thought, this will be a snap. I've been to an oil spill seminar and been permitted to work at oil spill sites. So I treated this bird like I thought you ought to do, and I was pretty successful. My husband and I are bathing with Dawn soap this bird every day for almost 2 weeks. I stopped bathing it when one of its talons punctured a major vein, and I'm spurting blood all over. Now, doctors don't know what to do when somebody comes in and says an owl stuck its talon in this vein. They hardly, they don't know about things like that. But at any rate, I got to the point then where we stopped bathing it, and I started using that orange cleaner that you can get on his legs, because I couldn't get its legs clean. I couldn't get that stuff off its legs. And I had learned that what I needed to do, because most rehabilitators, it's a rule, number one rule, when a bird comes in, you never try to feed it, because it's in stress and it needs to have fluids, but not solid foods, just like a human being that is in stress. You don't feed them, you give them some kind of fluids. Well, I was told that what I needed to do was to force feed this bird to get that oil and toxin out of its body. And so I started force feeding, and these pellets came out, and they were pure tar. That worked beautifully. So I'd done everything okay, right? And I used this orange cleaner to clean the tar off the legs. The tar just, boy, it just went right off. And I decided to call an big East Coast rehabilitation center to find out when I should stop bathing it. Because I had, and I thought maybe I'm doing some damage. So I call, and I said, so when am I supposed to stop? I have met these people before at meetings. When am I supposed to stop bathing this bird? And she said, well, how long have you been bathing it? And I said, oh, about, I suppose 10 days. And she said, and it's still alive? I said, yeah. She said, it should be dead. You're not supposed to bathe them any more than 2 days. Somehow or another, I'd missed that in the oil spill training. So it was a success. We got this bird cleaned up. We had an incredible release. It's one of those things I can't tell you. It is such a feeling. It is just a beautiful, lovely feeling. And that woman, Gladys Black, is the one who started all this. And I feel so fortunate. That's my kestrel there. This is an old picture of Gladys. You youngsters don't know about Gladys, but most of the people, older people, surely have heard about Gladys Black. I was bird lady. This wonderful woman had faith in me to do something that I was absolutely not trained to do. And that's where volunteers come in. To be a volunteer is a really great thing, because that's what I am, is a volunteer. So you volunteers have a lot to be proud of, and a message to tell, a message to spread. And of course, that's what I do with my education. I'm just a hound dog on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. If I read in some magazine where people are suggesting you gather, I got Martha Stewart. You want to hear that story? In one of Martha Stewart's programs, she was talking about gathering birds' nests to decorate your house around a mirror. She was that glue stuff, glue gun stuff, little bird's nests around this mirror. And somebody called me, so I got the tape from her, and then I sent it to my federal office. The, and the federal office, we have 8 federal, what do you call them, divisions in this country. We're in with 8 other states, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois. These are in our district. So she called the federal officer, law enforcement officer in the state where Martha lived. And Martha got fined for having birds' nests because they're protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I'm not as bad as I used to be. I've relaxed a little bit. But boy, if I thought somebody had a bird or feathers or a nest or eggs, they were dead meat. Okay. My officer in Minnesota called me the nest police, and but she was really good about it. So I'm not gonna call anybody if you've made jewelry out of bird's feathers. Yeah, that happened to me. I called about a shop in Valley Junction who is selling necklaces that were made out of local our protected birds. Only 3 birds are not protected by that law. Do you all know them?
Sparrow?
Which one?
The common house, that common
Okay,
common
house sparrow.
Yeah, I have a lot of them.
Right. It's not even a sparrow, it's a weaver finch, but somebody from England thought that they ought to be in this country, and so they introduced them. What's another one?
Robin?
Oh, a robin is a native species.
Oh, so it's one's.
It's protected. Which 3 are not protected by that law? The house sparrow, or English sparrow. Starlings. The starling was introduced in the late 1800s by a man who wanted to introduce all the birds that were mentioned in Shakespeare's plays.
You seem thrilled about it.
And look what happened. It's extraordinary. That bird had no enemies here. So it has thrived, and it has done a real job on our red-headed woodpeckers, our flickers, any other nest cavity nesting bird, it really does a job on. I have birded in Costa Rica and Venezuela, and starlings are all over this hemisphere because of that one man bringing that bird. You can have it as a pet. Go get them. You can have their nests, you can have their eggs, you can have their feathers. Take all you want. They make great pets because they will mimic. They're mimickers. It isn't the bird's fault. It's this human thing of bringing in plants, insects, mammals, well, you name it, all other living things that aren't supposed to be here, that introduce things thinking that it will solve problems or be a good thing. So what's the third one? There's actually a season on this one. No, mourning doves are a native species. The feral pigeon. And it's another introduced species, probably brought over for food and released. Now the thing about the pigeon it doesn't really displace anything. It may take some food, but it doesn't really displace anything. I was listening to a program the other day on NPR, and they did a program on how quickly, it was about species that have been extirpated, how the passenger pigeon, how quickly the passenger pigeon went. So as Gladys always said, remember this, be forever vigilant, because it can happen again, and it is happening. And so we all need to raise our voices about habitat, habitat, habitat. We have a volunteer here whose family supplied me with a great number of wild mice. Chelsea? She grew up in Osceola. Her grandfather had a bluebird trail out at his cabin along a river, right? The Grand River. And they would clean out the bluebird houses in the spring and bring me many, many wild mice. Now, you can't find a better food than that. As a matter of fact, remember, if you get lost in the jungle, capture a mouse, because it's perfect. It's a perfect food. It's got everything you need. So there you go. Now you know what you can do to survive. So thank you, Chelsea. I'm sorry we're not getting those mice anymore. But yeah, it was a family project, and they would clean out the bluebird boxes.
It was
You know, I have 30 years worth of stories, and I don't think you have time for that. This has been such a ride for me. I can't tell you. It's been just incredible. I have met so many people. I've been asked to go with people to Raptor meetings where people come in from all over the world, not to speak, but they just have asked me to go along because they knew I'd be interested, and to meet the authors of the books that are written about all of these different species, and all of the people like you. I get to do this kind of thing. And I get to buy mice, 300 at a time. And it is just has been a real ride. And I've got Gladys to thank, and I've got that man who's lived with me for 57 years, because he's put up with a lot. Okay. Are there any questions? Well, like the Bluebird Trail at Red Rock, we banned the babies. So the babies are in the Bluebird box. And Red Rock has lots of volunteers, and there's a volunteer, husband and wife, who only take care of nest boxes. And they have 100 bluebird boxes up, and they have 3 martin houses with, the big nest boxes. That's not true. Most birds do not have a sense of smell. The only bird that has a true sense of smell are the vultures, and particularly the turkey vulture. And by the way, you're looking at, I am known as the national expert on raising vultures. I have gotten calls when at the ocean. I've gotten calls when I'm in the mountains from people who just had a turkey vulture turned in. Not many turkey vultures get turned in, evidently. But I love raising and working with turkey vultures. They are so smart. They're so smart. They're just great fun. And when they come in as babies, I don't know what you have here at the zoo, but when they come in as babies, they're all this white, woolly, it's like sheep's wool fuzz. They're absolutely adorable. Now, a few years ago, I had a pair come in from a place down on the Missouri border where they wanted to tear down the barn. And if I didn't go down there at 8 o'clock at night to get those babies, they were going to keep them and not tell me where they lived, because they were going to raise them. So I got in the car and I drove to the Missouri border and picked up these 2 babies. Raptors hatch every other day, so they were, or longer. There were 2 sizes, one about this big and one about this big. I raised them the same. The bigger one, when I released that bird, it didn't even say goodbye. It was out of there. It wanted nothing to do with me. But the other one decided that he kind of liked it there in my space, our space. And so he hung around on the deck railing. He stood at the door and watched the television set. He went to the golf course. We don't live on a golf course. We're near a farm. But he would fly to the golf course and land on golf carts and ride around on golf carts. He would go to Casey's store in uptown Osceola and land on the roof, and it got so that he was an attraction. People, Casey's loved him. They had more business than they knew what to do with. And what was weird was that they would buy sandwiches and throw stuff up to that bird, and it would eat it. Who would think it would have made my life a whole lot easier, and my husband's, just to throw him a sandwich. But because Jim is out on his bike picking up roadkill to feed these birds when they got to the age where they could eat roadkill. Well, Warren County Conservation decided to bring their camp kids there to my house to talk about the birds that were there. And I had no birds in rehabilitation that day because I can't allow public to get close to them. So I was taking the children around to see the education birds in the cages. And I said, now kids, there were 15 of them, don't be afraid if a great big bird comes in. He's just as curious, that's all. Well, sure enough, we're in a single file going down the steps to the backyard and headed toward the barred owl cage. And here comes Beaky, but I didn't see him. One of the last kid in the line said, Beth Brown, Beth Brown. And I turned around and he said, here he is. That bird, we called him Beaky, from a cartoon character that was around when my kids were little. Here's Beaky, and he's walking along with the kids. And he walked all the way around until we sat down on their rugs in front of the garage, and he sat down. He only moved when their bus came in to pick them up, and then he flew away. I got a call from KCCI saying, we've heard about a turkey vulture. And I said, no, no, he's gone, he's not around. And he said, well, I might come down anyway. And I said, no, I don't want you to do this. You know, he's not supposed to be doing this. He's supposed to be off doing his turkey vulture thing. And I swear I did not imprint that bird, okay? Because I raised him just like the other one. Well, it is, I'm not kidding you, 7 o'clock in the morning. Do you have any idea what I look like at 7 o'clock in the morning? And this guy on KCCI who does these little special things, I can't think of his name. Who?
6'6" or something? Eric Manson.
Yeah, that might be. Kind of good-looking young man. He's at my door along with a photographer. And I said, he's not here. And I told you I didn't want to do this. And at that very moment, that vulture flew in and landed on the deck railing. I hadn't seen him for days. It's like something went out into the atmosphere that told him I get to be on television. So, of course, he was on the 6 o'clock news that night. So vultures are. How did I get to that story? You shouldn't ever ask me a question, I guess, because I'll go on and on and on. Well, we finally, after Beaky started landing on picnic tables at the park that's not too far from us and eating sandwiches off that picnic table while people are sitting there, I decided it was time that Beaky take a trip. And so I found a really good place, and I managed to entice him into the cage that he had been in. And I got him in a carrier, and we took him 10 miles from town. He beat me back. So we had to do it again, and that time it worked. He came back the next year and was sitting on golf carts. So I know it was he. I know he survived. They migrate all the way to Venezuela. So I know he made that long trip and made the trip back. And he was there the next year. And after that, I haven't had people calling saying, we've got this vulture following the lawnmower and eating the frogs and toads that the lawnmower is cutting up. So he was a real trip. Anyway, I love to do turkey vultures. Are there any other quick questions? In the state of Iowa, I should have counted that up, but almost every county has some kind of a rehabilitator. But there are more mammal rehabilitators than there are bird rehabilitators. Yeah, that's a good question. I have an apprentice that is licensed. My rule is that they have to live near me. I can't keep track of somebody who is even 30 miles away. It's got to be someone in my community. So I had somebody apprentice under me, and she had certainly been a great help, but she now has a second home in Ireland. And so she's spending time there, and she had a grandchild. And you know, that really did it to me, but she's keeping her permit up for when her grandkid grows up and doesn't like her anymore, you know, that, yeah, that kind of thing. We have some wonderful centers. At Kirkwood Community College is an incredible raptor center. They're the ones who started the reintroduction of the osprey in the state of Iowa. The Wildlife Care Clinic at Ames has been, at the university has been, but I think now it's going pretty well. And we have one at Spirit Lake, up where I'm from. Was born and raised at Okoboji. We have a rehabilitator there who is just an incredible, she does everything, and I don't know how people do that. I don't know how you do 100 raccoons along with all those other animals. She has an incredible facility, and she does a wonderful job. We also have one at Dedham, Iowa. Newman. Kay Newman, thank you. Went right out of my head there. Kay is a good friend. Don't tell her that happened. I'm 82. What do you expect? She is working really hard on the lead poisoning, and trying to ban lead shot. I was involved in getting the lead out of shooting ducks. I'm very proud of that. But this has really been tough, this go around. People get really angry now if you try to change anything about their hunting behavior. They have real problems. So there's Kay Newman. She's got an incredible facility, but we have a new one going up. And I say we because I have to look toward where I will have some place for people to be told to take animals. I'm 82, you know. I could drop dead tomorrow. So people need to have a place to take these animals that they find. And Marlene Ersman, the wife of a non-game biologist, is building a wonderful thing called Iowa Wildlife Care. It's right beside the ledges. It's an incredible place. And she's going to be working with almost all animal species. I believe she's not going to do raccoon or deer, but she's a raptor person, but she's going to do some mammals also. And she's gonna it's going to be a wonderful place, and I'll be very comfortable in telling people to take their animals to her. Anything else? Any other questions? You know, we couldn't ever get this lady to shut up either, you know? So I guess I'm like her. If you're looking for a book to give to friends, relatives, or your library, two friends of mine, Larry Stone and John Stravers, wrote a book about Gladys Black. So Gladys had printed some books from her articles that she put in the Des Moines Register for a lot of years. So look for this in your bookstore. Gladys Black, The Legacy of Iowa's Bird Lady. She's also the mother of rehabilitation in the state. She and a man by the name of Homer Calkins were approached by the DNR, the new DNR, who no longer were going to be taking in wild animals, and asked if they would be willing to take in injured animals. And Gladys was the first. The head of the law enforcement helped her build her cages, and She became my friend, my teacher, and kind of a pseudo mother who insisted upon cutting up my meat, even though I was 50-some years old. So it's been a trip, you guys. It's been a real trip. That's what they eat. They come, 300 of them, packaged in 25 to a package, and they're extra large black. And I get 300 at a time, and that's because you want your box filled up, because they're going to charge you really by the box. And there's always room then for some quail, and the red-tailed gets, I have a red-tailed hawk education bird, and he gets the quail. Yeah. And it costs $274. Well, it just depends on how many birds I have. And by the way, this is something that's been really interesting. As I said, when I started this, I was getting in about 100 birds a year, sometimes more. Now, I guess we've done a really good job of education, because one of our mantras is, leave wildlife alone. And I'm down to maybe, I think this last year I had in 15, and that included songbirds, not just raptors. So it's really interesting how this, over this 30 years, how this has dropped. And we don't know why. And it's not just me, it's everybody is experiencing this same thing. So. Yes. Yeah, you can't keep anything that's releasable. These are non-releasable birds. The federal agencies they got together a few years ago, and they set rules and regulations for every federal district. So we now have all the same rules and regs. Before, you'd go to a national meeting and somebody in Missouri would be doing things differently than in Iowa, and New York would be doing something different, and certainly California. And so, you know, now we all are expected to follow the same rules and regulations. And we can no longer have one-winged raptors. That was a bird that a lot of us kept for education, because particularly if it was a really good bird. Like I have had short-eared owls now for probably 20 years, and 2 of them had lost their wings, and had lost a wing. And the federal people decided this is too stressful for the bird, and too stressful on the public, because the public gets upset when one of those birds lose their balance, even though they do learn how to adjust to not having 2 wings. But that's the rule now. So no longer can we have one-winged birds. I am really good at certain things and really awful at other things. I have a hard time stabilizing those broken wings with that figure 8 wrap that they try to teach you to do. I can't seem to get it on there so it'll stay. So I have a real problem with that. So what I do now is I get that, if there aren't chips, bone chips. If there are bone chips, the bird needs to be euthanized. But if it's a nice clean cut and it's kind of off, and I can tell by the x-ray, and I can get that back like this, and I leave the bird alone, it will callus over. It won't lose its muscle from being tied to its body, and that's working for me. I am really good at leg breaks. I'm good at that. And I'm okay with birds that are starving. Starving. That for one reason or another I haven't been able to find food. So thank you. You people have sat there being really nice. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't have my birds, okay?